Krim here with the last part of the Fantasy Night set. This one we're going to be covering the touch-up, tone, and coloring, as well as some reference angles for the knights. So I mentioned before that you can use the tone to change the color, colorizing it. This is what I'm showing now. I did this ahead of time just so I could have it ready, but basically pop the tone on, then you can make it to where it clips to the layer below. And you can actually do this with the folder too to keep things simple. You can make it to where the folder clips and you can do the whole thing with that too. It's convenient for coloring certain things when you just want to knock something out really fast, and I'm going to be using this a lot more often with the future ones, the future concept arts. But anyway, let's go ahead and fix the legs here. I mentioned this previously. The legs were bothering me. I didn't like how large the thigh was compared to the calf. It just did not look right for this. But that's one thing with silhouettes. They sometimes don't add up. And we're just going to fix all the little things, and then we're actually going to dive into the shading and the tone and such. And hopefully we can knock all that out without too much of an issue. I'm going to be making a few mistakes here and there as I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with this. It is concept art after all, so I have to think about it. We're fixing the gauntlet too, because that made no sense. The way it was curving into the arm like that would make it difficult for them to bend. Fixing the breastplate because that half just did not look right. Adding the part to the cuirass where you can actually take it off. And making the bulge in the front that's for deflecting shots, making it a little bit more obvious that that's what that's for. Also fixing this so that it matches the other one. And refining this because it looked a little bit too large. Just a few little things like that that I was noticing while I was going but didn't have much time to actually fix. Now's the inking part. This I should have done on another layer, but it doesn't matter too much. It's not going to factor in too much for concept art. But this is just highlighting where the absolute darkest parts are. And I could go ham wild with this and just have it go pretty much wherever the folds are. And that would make it look really interesting, but for the sake of time, we're just going to do a few key locations. And here I'm doing it underneath the skirt, but that's going to take too long, all the little parts. It's easier just to do that in the tone. Now a few accessory points, and this should have been on another layer instead of being on the same layer as the ink. Because the ink, I would have preferred to change the opacity so I could control how dark it is, but because it's on this layer, can't really do that now. I could, but it just would look weird because you'd have floating nails and such. So that's a mistake I made while doing this, and luckily, concept art, it doesn't matter too much. And I knew about the mistake as soon as I did it, and I was like, well, I'm recording it, so I gotta keep going. So, figured I'd bring it up now. So that's pretty much done. Now we have to adjust the tone to where it actually somewhat matches up. I'm not gonna really use the tone for this one, but this is what you'd have to do if you're messing with it too much. Now, I could have selected both layers when I initially changed the scale for the model from the line art, and it would have adjusted the tone as well to match where I was changing the the proportions of the line art. So now as part for shading, I like to just lower the opacity and take a nice G pen and just go back in with my paintbrush to smooth it out some, and sometimes I'll just use the paintbrush, this brush right here, and the thin version of it. Because it has a simulated flesh texture to it, I guess you could say. Like, it's got the pores, and it also looks pretty well for metal. It's one of the most abused brushes I have. I pretty much use it for everything. I think I found it on the Open Canvas Marketplace as a free download. It's definitely worth it. So just going to go ahead and touch up here and there and add and remove until I'm happy with the initial shading. And with this shading, I could apply the tone effect, the color effect from before that I showed with the tone. But the problem with it, and you'll see this pretty soon, is I don't actually have a background color for this model. It's just lying on a actual background that happens to be white, so there's no white inside of the lines, so I'll have to fix that and also apply black and whatever other textures I want so that the colorized effect can actually lay on top of it. Because right now, if I use the folder I made previously to colorize the shades, it actually won't apply anything. Because even these shades I'm doing are referencing the background layer of the white that's just in the background. So it won't actually touch anything. And you'll see it. And I'll fix it. It's pretty easy to fix. All you have to do is select the background, and then you invert the selection. So it's pretty simple. Doesn't take too much time, but it does take a little bit of time for touch up, so it would be ideal to have a background color that isn't white. That way you can tell what's going on. I usually use a color that I'm not planning on using at all for the model. So for instance, this is going to be mostly black and red. So if I used something like green, green would really pop. Same with blue. Blue would really pop. So just some ideas. It's not necessary for a lot of stuff, especially not concept art, but it does help whenever you're doing a big project, so you don't have one missing line here and there. Just touch this up a little bit more with the shading, how the plate mail would lie. And I'm not trying to do too much with the shading to make it correct. There's no light source really that's in focus, just enough for me to look at the picture and get a feeling for what the color will do and how the armor interacts with itself. And see, just blending in the shades together. Okay, now you're going to see the colorizing effect. See, these colors I showed you before, they're not doing anything because, well, there's nothing for them to grab onto. And even if I take it out of the folder, they're not doing anything. The reason why they worked before with the tone is because the tone was thick enough to where it could actually sit on top of it. But these little highlights, it's not going to be enough to do anything. See, you can see the difference from that and just adjusting a few of the settings to change it. I like to keep it on color, add glow, sometimes linear burn, color burn and multiply. And in some instances, screen. There's a few settings that work and a few that are just annoying. The thing with open canvas is you can't actually scroll up and down in the settings to adjust the screen effect. Other things like, sorry, I said open canvas. What I meant was Clip Studio Paint. Open canvas, you can actually scroll up and down and it will fast track adjust them. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and touch this up. Make it to where it actually has a background and we can properly see what's going on. And also get rid of the color burn. Yeah, I did that previously with the red. That was just to highlight how much of a difference two settings can make. And if you see the mouse fidgeting a lot in this video, I'm not having a random attack or anything like that that's crazy. I'm just having a coughing fit at that point and the tablet's still picking up my movement. So yeah. And this is what I was talking about changing the background color to where you can see what's actually going on. Since I had a lot of white already built into this, I couldn't quite tell where it was already highlighted and not, so it's something that is definitely necessary for larger projects. Something like this, I actually did not need to do it, but it just helps. Now I can properly see what's going on and see where I've messed up. A few variants. So the colors, I'm kind of just going to keep them to the base layer, and I'll have another color layer on top of them that will be something that will actually transfer over between the variants of the base color. So if I had a base color that was gold or whatever, the accessory color will always be the same accessory color, and I can apply another color filter on top of that to change the accessory color to something else if I decide to adjust that. This is just more or less like if you want to have the same look, but have some variety still. Sort of like in Smash Brothers, where it's like player 1, player 2, player 3, and all that stuff. Now, sometimes they actually do have completely different outfits, but whatever. It's just something for me to easily change around. So I'm thinking red on black for this, or red on a blue gray or so. Something that doesn't scream edgelord too much, but okay, let's just face it. This is super edgelord. I mean, it's a Dark Knight sort of thing. It was meant to have these sort of colors, but it looks pretty well with gold too. The red and gold. So I guess there's that. Just highlighting some key locations, not really trying too hard to make sure that everything matches up perfect in this. This is just to help me with knowing where certain colors are going to be with the actual finished product whenever I use this as a reference. And I'm going to be making a few adjustments as I'm going along, like the little dots that I have there, the little rivets. Those aren't going to be red in the finished product, but right here I was thinking I might want to have red rivets, because, you know, red rivets, why not? Everything's red apparently. And the color overlay that I was talking about previously, the thing that I'm actually doing with the tonals and all that to change the color, I like to do those, the overlay, the clip below thing, mostly for highlighting line art. So I can change the color of the line art. You'll see me do that pretty soon here, because it looks a little weird for there to be red right next to black lines. And I just don't really like doing that in general for my art anymore. I used to think it was fine, and then I saw something like No Game No Life where they had purple line arts and all these other amazing colored line arts, and I was like, oh my goodness, that looks so amazing to have the line art as actually, like, not black and white. It looked cool, and I've stuck with it pretty much with everything I've done since watching that. And this program actually makes it really easy to change the line art to whatever you want, whenever you want. So we're going to go ahead and highlight that. Go ahead and make these. So what I usually like to do is I will take the color and then I will slightly darken it, but I was having a little bit of an issue with the gray, if I should just leave the gray as the black or what, because it was already matching pretty well. The red's another story. So the way I can do this with the red, because it is metal, instead of going a darker color, I could go a lighter color. That way it's more like a highlight. And I can do this in certain locations, like if it's near the tip of the arm, or just something to do with the finished product. Here it doesn't really matter too much, because I can just be like, yeah, it's red lines on red, so it's not that big of a deal. But if I was doing something like a geode or something like that, that happens to have a shine effect to it, a sheen, I could actually just change it to where the outside is a lot brighter than the inside. And it's a nice effect. It works pretty well with eyes and such on anime characters, so just something to keep in mind. Fixing a few locations. And you see that dark effect right there? That's from where I had done the inking and didn't move it to its own layer. So kind of stuck with that, unfortunately, for this. But it's not that big of a deal. It did change the color to more of a gray than a black, so that kind of worked out for the shading anyway. And we can just change the background color to see how it will look. Honest, I love the gold, but this also works. The red, not so much, because it kind of looked a little bit too pink to me. And we can make this as bright as possible. And we could always apply another clip below layer on top of the accessory red to have that be something else. Like if I wanted it to be a neon blue or something ridiculous, a white, I could have it be a gray or whatever. Anyway, just some variety that we can easily do in this, and I can touch up later if I decide to change my mind about something. Now, I'm not really labeling the layers. I don't have too many layers in this, so changing the names of the layers, while it would be helpful for a large project, for this, it's all in the same folder. There's hardly any layers for this, so it's not that big of a deal for this. But if I was in like 1,000 or so layers, I would probably do that. Granted, I'd also probably be having the layers combine. That way they're not as many. Merging them whenever I'm done, because I usually just color over top of my finished product anyway. So here I'm just trying to give a glow effect to see if I wanted to have it to where the red was actually glowing, or if it was just painted armor, and I didn't really like the look of it. I mean, in some sets it would probably look amazing, especially if it was like a glowing weapon. But for this, I'm just going to keep it the eye, the single eye. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and get rid of the red here anyway, because it really didn't make sense to be on the horns. I mean, those are the creases in the horns anyway. Why would they be red? So, and what I should have done, and I probably will do this at a later point, is change the color of the horns to be a different shade of gray, possibly even like an ivory, off yellow, white color. But that's something I can touch up later. And to give it a little bit of a dimension, a shadow. Now, I don't normally do this because it doesn't matter too much in this phase, but I figured it would help make the character pop a little bit more, so why not? It's just something easy to do. Now, if I would have actually had a reference angle for the lights, that would have been a different story for how the shadows would fall, because right now the shadows don't really make much sense anyway. Alright, just quickly do this. It's really not important, and I'm wasting so much time just trying to get the shadow right. Just playing with these a little bit more because I like the variety. Yep, just a few more touch-ups here and there. Time for the highlights. Now this is what really makes the armor pop. And it really makes any character pop, to be honest. Now, you can leave it as that glossy white, that really, really vibrant white, and just change it to where it is either a clip below or some other setting, and have it to where it's set to be add glow. That way it just makes the character below the whatever color they already had, it just makes it brighter. And that's what I would normally do in some situations. Not really doing that right now. Just going to leave it as normal for now, just so I can get a feel for what's going on. And doing that actually will help the red highlights in this, because you can see instead of making the red look pink, it just makes them look like foggy, which isn't ideal. And these sort of situations, I would just use the dipper tool or whatever, the tier tool, whatever it is. I can't think about it right now, but I would just take the dropper and I would grab the color of the red, and then I would just make it slightly more pink and just spread it like that and just do color by color. But it's a lot slower doing like that, so I prefer to do it with the add glow effect if I am just doing something fast, or just not give those parts highlights at all and just focus on the base colors. That comes down to personal preference and time, so just go ahead and smooth this out to make the metal look a little bit more unique, I guess. And after this, we're going to do a second layer of highlights. This one's going to be mostly focusing around the real highlights. These are just for the metal sheen. So, but it will be a lot of corrections because I was hoping that the red would actually turn out better whenever I applied the filter effect, and it just did not. Not for this one. Which is a shame. Just try all the settings except for the add glow for some reason. Pretty much all the locations that are red with a little white on it, I'm going to end up having to remove, so it'll look better by the end. And that's just part of the trial and error with this part. And I don't fully remove it, I just take a little light brush to just take off a little bit of the top. So, a little bit more sheen. And that about does it. Once this is over, I'll just do some reference angles. Just a side view. I could also do a view of the open visor. And just whatever, the back view. Just whatever I need, to be honest. I'm just going to do the side view because I want to see how the horns would fold in. And it would take a little bit of time to get the horns just right. But once you have a general feel for how the armor lays, it's not too hard to do a quick sketch. And that's the whole point of the concept art. It helps you look back on it and be like, all right, so this is what this is how many of these I need, and this is the color I need. It helps a bit. So much faster now that I can just look at the arm and be like, yeah, I did this here and there, and fix the glove and the gauntlets and the shoulder pads to where they actually match up a little bit more. Now these side spikes, I actually didn't quite know what to do with those at the time. I was like, well, should I have them be extra spiky on this or what? So I just made it to where it looked slightly spiky. So. And this is fine to be sketchy. It's just to highlight the side. So long as the main concept art that you're drawing from is clear enough that you can get the colors and the general feel for the accessories and such, the reference angle art doesn't matter that much. Just enough so you can see where stuff is on the side and back and such. Now, all the advice I'm giving with this is with the idea that you're making the art for yourself. If you're working with a team doing the art, that's another story. People looking at your art will want to see more details because if you're drawing the concept art and giving it to someone else to actually make the real thing, they're going to be like, hey, what is this? What is this? What is this? So if you're in that situation, it'd be a good idea to also just jot down notes on the side. That way they can look at the notes instead of asking you a bunch of questions what each item is. And in that situation, the open visor would be a good idea so that they can tell how it would open, like if it opens from the top, if it opens from the side, if it opens at all, and how does the helmet actually stay inside of that, and just stuff like that. Anyway, this pretty much touches up what's going on with the Fantasy Knights, what I can do with him. And next video, we're going to be highlighting the Outlaw heavy armor sets, or the more impoverished heavy armor sets. I'm thinking just by the concept alone that the armor won't really be armor. It'll be more like pots and pans that have been smelted down, so cast iron armor. And it's going to be super top heavy and really not very efficient for keeping them protected all over. But if they're attacked from the top, it'd be good. So until then, I'll see you around. Oh, and by the way, that video, I'm going to try and have all the steps in one video. I'm going to do that for the other ones because the Fantasy Knight armor, it had a lot of parts and it had to take a while. So sorry for that.